I want to welcome everybody to the Daily Cheat Sheet here with Colon and Guy Goldstein. It's late for me. It's 10:15 Friday night. Getting old, my friends, and it's early for you guys in Barcelona and Israel. But we wanted to do a show today. I think it's really important to talk about the SAVE Act
Yeah.
because, okay, so let's just get to the basics. A lot of Republicans are angry at John Thune. They call him Mitch McConnell light or whatever they want to call him. And they're angry at him for not getting rid of the filibuster. Now, what people don't understand is in order to get rid of the filibuster, you have to have a majority of Republicans or whichever party it is to get rid of it. Republicans, even though we have 53 seats in the Senate, there are 13 senators that refuse to get rid of the filibuster. So it's great that the House passed. Everybody in the House passed it, actually. I was mistaken the other day. Every House member passed it the other day, Golan, but Republican House member, I'm almost positive. But in this case, so Susan Collins came out today, the stalwart from Maine, saying she's pro the SAVE Act, knowing it's never going to get passed.
Yeah, well, it's real easy to be pro something and know that you never have to actually encounter it or deal with it in any way. Look, it is important, before we get into the SAVE Act itself, it is important to reiterate the fact that this is the circular firing squad thing is something that Republicans do so well, and the anger is misdirected. That idea that John Thune could have killed the filibuster, it's not that the Republicans have 60 seats. It's not that there's some governing majority that was going to be able to do this by fiat. You need to basically have nearly, at the very least, total caucus unity in order to make that happen. Republicans don't have that. So, as you said, there's a handful. What is it? What did you say? 15 senators?
13.
13 Republican senators.
That's almost 2.5 handfuls.
There you go. Well, it depends on which Republican senators you're talking about. But I digress. But yeah, the idea of saying if we wanted to have that sort of thing happen, we would have to have just unanimity, and it doesn't exist. So to go after him for not being able to pull it off is ridiculous. When it comes to the SAVE Act itself, look, this is really, really important. There's a reason why Trump is going to step in. I'm sure we'll talk about that beyond what happened here. It passed the House. It failed to clear the Senate. This is something that just feels like
it didn't fail to clear the Senate. It will pass the Senate. They're going to vote on it in the Senate. So,
but it won't get over the Senate filibuster, is what I meant.
Right.
Yeah, and that's really who gives a bleep if it passes, but the filibuster kills it.
Right,
it's the same ultimate thing. Right. Okay, there you go. So it's informative for our audience to know it's not going to happen. But because this is such a
no,
crucial
I said
thing,
it's performative for some of them.
Performative. I see. That's your point about Susan Collins. Thank you. That's nice. That's nice. But ultimately, in the end, we need this sort of thing because state election rules require this. Non-citizens are voting. We know this. And just the other day, I was talking to someone in the UK. I'm going to use a quick parallel and then I'll beg off. But they were talking about how there's an organization in the UK.
That means it's going to be 5 minutes.
Yeah, just about five to seven. So there's an organization in the UK that has been deemed a terrorist organization, and it has been illegal to do business with them and to be a member of them and to speak about them publicly. And
Labor
the courts
Party.
just that's very funny. No, an actual prescribed terrorist organization. And the UK courts just overturned that ruling. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that the paperwork said they are not to be deemed a terrorist organization because they didn't do enough terrorism. Yes, they did terrorist acts. They literally broke a policewoman's spine with a sledgehammer. They actually committed terrorism. But it wasn't enough terrorism. And so therefore, we're going to go ahead and allow them to no longer be deemed a terrorist group. That's what this reminds me of, where they're like, it's just some illegals that are voting. So what's the big deal? Why would we change anything? And to me, I would like 0 illegals voting. I would like 100% faith in our elections. So that's my take on it anyway.
I think it's a good take. And Guy, here's the thing, either party, in a sense, is going by the will of the people. This is one of those weird times where both parties are not listening to the will of the people. At least 78, 79% of Americans think you need to have a valid form of identification. So that obviously crosses party lines on both sides. and the parties are just not listening. And
Mhm.
that's a frightening thing.
And I think that's what you're touching on there is actually the much bigger picture here, which is the shift from representative politics to party politics is actually the problem. The problem isn't that John Thune can't pull the Republican Party into line to vote uniformly as a bloc. That's actually a healthy part of democracy. The bigger problem is that the Democrats have drawn a hard line that says we're all going to do this regardless of the policy. We disagree. That's their policy. And what that means is that instead of the will of the people being done by the House and the Senate, instead what you have is the will of the party. And that's the opposite of what America is supposed to stand for, right? And I personally think the filibuster has a lot of potential as a concept for moderating the ability to have a one vote majority dictate the way that a country goes. But it requires cooperation across the aisle. And it requires a collaborative disagreement, not the sort of destructive disagreement that you have now. The disappointment is that Susan Collins is the only voice on the other side saying, you know what, my constituents and the people I represent would be benefited by having their right to vote not diluted by people who aren't American citizens.
By the way,
There should
Susan
be
Collins
45
is a Republican.
Democrats saying that.
By the way, just so you know, Susan Collins is a Republican.
My bad.
Yeah, and she's from Maine. She's one of those people that she got Kavanaugh in. She's done a lot of good stuff, but at the same time, there are certain senators, and people often forget this go on at the same time too, is if you're from certain places, whether it be California, well, not anymore after there can be no Republican congressman, but they need a certain amount of cover from the state they're in. Like we don't have any representatives in Maine, just for perspective, but we do have a senator, which is extremely grateful. And she has to sort of thread the needle constantly. She's up for reelection of getting reelected. So we can't expect her to be MAGA.
Well,
Okay.
this is actually important because I have heard, and I've even heard people who I really respect throw the term RINO around. I have a problem with the term RINO because most of the time, not all of the time, but most of the time, that RINO, for those of you who don't know, that's Republican in name only. And it gets like a label slapped on people who are from purple states. And you have to understand the dynamic of a Republican from a purple state. Every vote you take is a potential campaign ad against you. Every single one is its ideology is nice and lockstep is nice, but survival is mandatory because imagine that person disappears. Someone's going to have to come in there, and it's either
It's
going to be someone who is even further to the left or someone who will be performatively
And by the
further to the
way,
left.
let me before you go, Guy. But go on. When people use the term RINO and they're referring to Republicans that are in safe states.
But no. Sometimes what I'm
but
saying is
I'm right.
people who don't know better use that term and don't understand that you don't get credit for being pure if you lose your seat and hand power to the other side.
Right, but I
I
just
just want
want
to
to
make sure
say,
people think about that before they bandy around labels.
there are some people on this list, whether they're from Oklahoma or it's been Mitch McConnell in the past or Rick
Yeah.
Scott from Florida who's opposed to it but would change his view. So you do that's the separation, right? Tom Tillis,
That's
from
fair.
North Carolina, or even a guy like John Thune. So, or John Cornyn, another one of these guys, from Texas who really doesn't have a chance of losing. So that's where the RINO is. I'm not referring to states.
I understand that. I understand if you're in a deep red state and there's a zero risk state and all of that. I'm just saying in general, let's be careful with those labels because sometimes we're asking people like here, like what happened with John Thune here. It's like, oh, you're a traitor for not doing this. Like it wasn't going to happen no matter how many names you call it.
Right. Anyways, Guy, go ahead.
But again, that's if you look at the original structure of the United States, senators weren't supposed to have to play that game. Senators were supposed to be nominated by the state houses. That was a safeguard against everything being about trying to stay popular, right? At some point, someone needs to take ownership of doing what's important for the people and doing what the people want. And in Australia, for example, we use referendum. We don't do it often. We don't do it well, but there's a process by which you actually skip the middlemen and let every single person have a vote on an issue. We did it for same-sex marriage. We did it for whether or not we were going to leave the Commonwealth. We did it for whether or not we were going to create an alternate native or indigenous Australian parliament. that would have a whole set of unusual powers that nobody understood. One of those passed, two of those didn't. You can figure out, well, I'll let people figure out as a game which one it was that passed. But the point is, it basically said this is an issue that needs to go to the people. And if everybody's playing electoral politics all the time, and what you wind up with is two parties where the debate is, can we get the people inside the party to conform, to skip the filibuster, rather than can we get 80% of the senators to vote for something that 80% of the population want and the 100% of the population needs, because the 20% voting may or may not be legal. The 20% in the nay may or may not be the people that can vote because they're not supposed to.
But can I just jump in to
I
go
just
on
want
before you
real
do?
quick hang on. This is for the listeners. I just want to clarify something
This-
that the guy said. Can I just do it real quick? Because
Yeah,
many
of
people
course.
won't know what he's referring to. Is that originally senators in the United States were not elected by voters. They didn't have to campaign. It wasn't the popular vote, always making sure that you're staying on the good side of everybody. They were chosen by state legislatures. So it basically meant that the House and state Senate picked them. And so while you had on one side, people really had to be gregarious and make sure you were keeping, glad handing and everything else. The other side, they were doing it on behalf of the state as a sovereign entity. It was a different animal. And it actually was really effective. It changed, I think it was the 17th Amendment that changed it. But up until that point, that was the way it worked. And it worked that way for a reason.
But I just wanted to read you the list of the names, okay? So you got Barrasso from Wyoming. So that's why they call him a RINO. It's Wyoming. You got, Cocaine Mitch, right? You got Tillis from North Carolina.
That's the best name ever.
You got John Curtis from Solid Red, Utah. Kevin Kramer, Solid Red, North Dakota. John Cornyn, Solid Red, Texas. James Langford, Oklahoma. Roger Marshall, Kansas. Mike Rounds, South Dakota. And Steve Daines, Montana. So I'm not even putting Murkowski in there from Alaska, who's not on this. It says key Republicans. I guess they don't consider Murkowski a key Republican. Or Collins a key Republican. So you're talking that list goes up to 15, but that's what they were saying about RINO.
Did you say Ohio? Is Ohio one?
No. And I said, but what the bigger point is, when people say RINO, those are 13 RINOs. Those are 13 people from heavily Republican states. And when you minus 30, that's a big portion of the Senate, so let's not minimize why people are calling them RINOs. Is that fair?
It's absolutely fair. And all I was saying was I wanted to caution people, because it's very easy to slap a label on somebody and just assume the worst without actually understanding the context of it. So while there are people who will say, I don't vote alongside my colleagues, despite the fact that I'm not afraid of losing my seat, they might have other ideological things that they lean on or whatever. What was his name? Ben Sasse, right?
Ben Sasse, who's sadly dying.
But he was oppositional to Trump for his own philosophical reasons, not because of political necessity. Does that count as a RINO? Some people would label it so, some people wouldn't. I'm just saying, understand the context before you slap a label on. That's all I was trying to get at.
And I've brought up that I'm not fond of using these terms anymore, but when I look at the states and where these people are from, and the anger guy that people in the Republican Party that want to drain the swamp, want Trump to get in there and do this stuff. Yeah, he's going to do this via executive action, but that could be immediately changed the second a new president comes in. So that's why I'm saying we have like 5 years, God willing, because I don't think we're going to lose in a year the Senate. And then, so I think we have a good 4 years where this is something that's so important, which is voter ID laws, which every other country has. And so there you are.
A new president or a new auto pen. Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you in principle. And I agree that it's disappointing. I agree that it's disappointing, but I think that putting it on the lack of internal coherence on the Republican Party misses the bigger picture of why there's a problem with American democracy. The problem isn't that the Republicans don't have internal cohesion, because again, if we're saying 70 to 80% of the American voters think that, there should be 15 Republican senators that don't agree. But there should be 35 Democrat senators that do agree.
But here's the thing. What we've come to learn, Guy, from Democrats,
I know,
is they don't care.
I know, but I'm saying that's the actual illness that the democracy around the world, not just in the United States, is suffering from. It's suffering from the fact that politics has become something other than what it was supposed to be. And it's gone from a governing system to a ruling system. And it's not because the president is a tyrant. It's actually because the aristocracy, if you will, no longer represent the people.
And I would say that right now we have to, one of the reasons why I'm always worried whenever an executive action is taken or executive order is taken is we already know the level of lawfare that is used, especially by the Democrats currently. So you're talking about, hey, when the next president comes in, you don't necessarily have to wait that long because district courts where policy goes to die when it's something that the president makes a decision on. You can see over and over again how many times all you need is one district court judge to basically these days slap a nationwide injunction on something before the ink is dry on a signature. We've seen this before. So yes, we can be worried about what's going to happen later, but we also have to keep our eye on what's going to happen now too.
Well, it's important. The point you're raising is why I said 4 or 5 years is because just so people understand, in order to get rid of the filibuster, in order to get votes passed, you need 60 votes, right? Sometimes you need less for certain things. In 2013, they changed it a little bit. In 2017, Mitch McConnell went along with Harry Reid's changes. But just so people understand, in order to get rid of the filibuster, all you need is a majority. And there will be that point where Democrats have that majority. And I think it's safe to say at this point, they will abuse it and use it as often and as much as they can. I mean,
it's not speculation. They told us that. They said, we're going to pack the courts. We're going to kill the filibuster. They went through a list of things that they want to do the minute they have power.
That's exactly right. So it's time to stop playing this game where you think there's gamesmanship and there's this old school mentality. When you have people, like when you look at the Democrat senators or some Republican senators, there's no there.
Well, that thing, real quick, do you remember they had the No Kings protests? At this point, because there is so much fracture, what did you say, Guy? You said it so beautifully. You said the
new
aristocracy
no longer represents the people.
Yeah, the aristocracy no longer represents the people. We are at a point now where we are going to just see presidents trading executive orders every time they come in office. So the next one will be like, okay, not only you can vote via email and there's no ID laws, and the next one will come in and be like, okay, you only can vote if you're wearing a suit of armor, and the next one will do the next thing. It'll just be ridiculous town. It'll be.
Well, that's what it has been. I mean, when Biden came in, he tore up every single one of Trump's executive orders, including Iran, including extremely dangerous executive orders that he tore up, Guy, just out of animus. And because of that, I mean, you could literally blame
most of what's happening right now in the world
because of Biden and his and
by the way, local
reversing.
states too. Zoran Mondani just did the same thing in New York. I mean, this is just the way it is now. This is how we govern.
And the thing is that this form of government is not what the United States was built for. This was what the people of the American people rebelled against. It's important to remember that the bicameral House system started with the British Parliament, and the upper house in the British Parliament is the House of Lords. That is people who are literally an aristocracy, who are there by virtue of being large landholders or stakeholders. You are born into the class of the House of Lords. So there was the People's House, and then there was the aristocratic House. The Senate changed that by making it the Senate being the best amongst the people. It was supposed to be a system where, rather than it being something you were born into, it was something that you earned through the respect of your peers. And today, it's something that you buy with manipulative campaigns. And at the end of what you're seeing is all of the worst aspects of European governance coming into American Parliament, usually the American system, usually through the Democrats. And the challenge that we have is the Republicans are faced with a Sophie's choice. Do we lose and be the bigger people because we love what it is? It's the parable of the mothers from in King Solomon. Do we sacrifice the baby because do we give up what we love because we love it so much that we wouldn't want to see it harmed? Or do we engage in the argument and risk it all?
Well, this is what Golan brought up the other day, where Golan, I think it might have been yesterday, where, you said, the hell with it, as far as messaging goes. You used to think, we're better than that, but you've come to realize it's not a matter of better than that. We have to fight fire with fire.
Yeah, absolutely. That was, I think, the thing you're talking about is when I was saying we shouldn't manipulate people, we should try and be honest and all of that. All it is manipulation. If all it is decree by fiat. If all it is, look, you mentioned the bicameral system. We don't have to get. I won't explain everything that we talk about, but the reason why that exists is because otherwise large states would dominate small states. Like there's a reason why these things are put in place, right? So and look it up if you don't know what it means. It's important. But bottom line is, at this point, all of the safeguards that were put in place are being subverted. If that continues to happen, and we do end up in a place where the governor or the mayor or the president simply just says, while I'm in office, here's all the crazy, crazy stuff that can happen. And then the next one comes in is like, delete all of that and we start over again. This is going to go, basically, it's going to be the end of the democratic America as a republic. As far as
Okay,
I'm concerned.
I feel like we've bored people enough about this subject.
This
I've
is
bored
not boring. This is,
I've,
you're talking, I honestly think this is one of those things that we should continue to talk about. We don't have to do it today, but I'm saying this, I understand what your instinct is because, okay, we're getting wonky and all of that, but people have to understand because it feels, I just real quick, one parallel. After 9/11, they hang on. After 9/11, I used to fly a lot. And then they were like, hey, you know what? We're no longer giving you food on planes and there's no knives. And at first you were like, what? I'm so used to doing it. Eventually people just got used to it. And when I would say, remember when luggage was free, they'd look at me like I had four heads. But the fact that we're getting used to this system doesn't mean that we should forget where we came from and doesn't mean we shouldn't pay attention to how screwed up it's getting. And we
I'm
should
not,
keep
no, listen,
sounding that alarm.
I think you're 100% correct. I think 20 minutes discussing it was, I didn't mean it. I don't find it boring at all, to be honest with you. There's a reason I know about it is because I don't find it actually boring. If I thought it was boring, I would have absolutely no idea what the hell I was talking about. I want to move on though, Guy. And there's one thing in life I really can't stand is hypocrisy. I mean, I've said we're all hypocrites in some ways, but the blatant hypocrisy we're seeing. And I go back again to the amount of unaccompanied minors that we've saved in our country. Now, when the movie Sound of Freedom came out, right, that was the whole thing, that everybody was jumping on board with Sound of Freedom and the importance of it.
Both
And
sides of the aisle.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it is extremely important. It is extremely important, child sex trafficking, what they're doing with children. And Lord knows what happened with these unaccompanied minors, Guy. But at the same time, I don't hear anybody talking about it. All I hear them talking about is the stupid Epstein stuff. Now I get it. It's sensational. It's sensationalized. It's the next Ryan Murphy movie on Netflix. The 135,000 kids won't be the next, or unaccompanied minors will not be the next Netflix special. But this duplicity, and I hate it. It's like you hear everybody that's just grilling Pam Bondi or whoever it is. Anybody that listens to the show knows I'm not a huge fan of. I hated when she gave out the binders. I will always bring that up. But Guy, it's like, what are we doing? I get it. Epstein was a massive whatever he was, but look at the 3 million that have been deported. Far worse, some might say.
And I think this is one of the sicknesses of our time. The myopic focus on the me and the now instead of understanding that there's a future. Why are kids the most important thing? Because kids are the future, right? Civilization is a contract between the people that exist now and the people that will exist in the future to build them a world that they can then inherit. We don't think about that anymore. Most people spend their time obsessing over what's interesting to me right now, what's triggering my dopamine right now, what's exciting me right now. Even the people who think that they're thinking about the future in a lot of instances are debating the things that matter now and not the things that matter in 2 years' time or in 10 years' time or in 50 years' time. And where it becomes really scary is when you understand that the people that want America to fall, people that are America's enemies in the world, they think in 100-year cycles. Whether it's the Muslim Brotherhood and their 100-year plan to dominate the world, or the Soviets, the Russians and their 100-year long plans to dominate the world, or the Chinese and their 100-year long plans to dominate the world, right? We are facing 100-year-long plans, and we're thinking about 2 minutes ago constantly.
Can I tell you something? I want to bring, it's really interesting you bring that up, but it's also our saving grace in many ways, right? What separates us from those other countries is that for many of those other countries is that we're not like mass, when it comes to Islam, they don't care about whether they see the crime they committed. If you put on a suit, most Americans would probably do far worse crimes if they knew that they could almost watch the crime that they had committed. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying, and I think that what you're pointing to is similar, but it's different, because what matters about about Western societies and America as the paragon of Western society is not that we don't see the long term and we focus on the now. It's that we take individual responsibility collectively. And I think one of the things that's happened with this age of hyperrealism, postmodernism, and sort of the loss of a connection to reality is that we've taken this idea that individualism doesn't have a collective goal. So everybody understood the American dream is a collective vision for individuals to be able to thrive. The American Revolution was a collective ambition for individuals to be free of tyranny. But that between the collective vision and the individual responsibility is what made America great. It's what underpins American exceptionalism. And this shift towards rabid individualism instead of rugged individualism is exactly what's undermined the strength of America.
I will also say that the enemies of America, I mean, we'll just use the three big ones right now, right? The Chinese Communist Party, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and the current Russian government. They don't care about their people. They care about historical outcomes.
That's what I was trying to say is that,
I understood where you were
and
going.
the people there are so in line with their government that to them death is in the name of the government. Death is in the name of Allah.
Yeah, and this is exactly right. In America, think of how much the focus shifts on a regular basis. Our politicians will panic at two bad quarters or a bad headline. They'll start to shift their opinions. They'll start to shift their policies. There's no shifting of policies in any of the three places I just mentioned. They have a specific goal in mind. If they have to throw their entire population into a meat grinder to do it, they will do it because the historical outcome is all that matters. In the end, our adversaries don't need to beat us militarily if they can outlast our attention span. And I'll tell you what, this Epstein thing that you're talking about, this disease of us being so focused on just the Kardashian reality TV of life, and this is the attention span kill that is happening on a regular basis. By the way, we can say, oh, we only watch reality TV, we did it to ourselves, whatever. That's not true. This has been something that has been pushed through social media, through these cycles by bad actors. And it's the same reason why now literally nobody is talking about anything else except for Epstein. I saw here in Barcelona, a man walked by me, his shirt said, release the Epstein files. Okay. We're in a permanent Epstein loop, and I'm still seeing people post on their social media. Why is nobody talking about Epstein? Why is people only talking about ICE? People are absolutely caught in the lascivious, key jingling in your face moment, and they do not see the forest for the trees. And that's how adversaries will take over if we don't do something to change it.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And Turbo and the rants, and for those that are listening to the Daily Cheat Sheet via audio, we are on Rumble Live and we are on YouTube too. Not live, but on Rumble Live. And he brings up a really good point, which is true. It's a very immature and myopic view of things that people are so invested in something that they can't see the forest. What is it? The forest through the trees?
Forest for the trees, yeah.
And I always get my things mixed up a little bit. They can't see the forest through the shreds or the shrubs. But, Guy, it's like part of growing up and we're all in a bit of a creative area. You write sometimes the articles you've written when you're 42 were not the same articles you wrote when you were 22. And the ideas and concepts that go on might have came up that we came up with 20 years ago, and we said, no, we could do this by ourselves. You know what happened to those ideas? They never got made. because we were so stuck on doing
Yeah.
it ourselves, not listening, taking advice, not listening to other people. And Guy, people are so stuck in this that it's owning them. And the people are, and they don't realize they're being so manipulated by people, by other forces outside of them. All these people that are always screaming about being manipulated by outside forces are the ones being manipulated by outside forces in regards to Epstein.
100%. And look, it's worth noting that part of this is that we're in a very strange time in human history because the tools that we rely on have the ability to control us in ways that are unprecedented. So the amount of data that your phone has about you and transfers to the people that are feeding you information gives them the ability to control your mind without you having a say in it, right? That's the default for algorithms, and we've really been reliant on the benevolence of gods, in a sense, not to take advantage of that. And then came TikTok, and then came Al Jazeera, and came all of these different malicious gods, if you will, that were still in people's pockets and still had access to all of that knowledge and information. And it's an amount of information that people cannot comprehend, and you cannot overcome it through natural means. There is no way for a human being to naturally overcome the ability of someone with all of that data on you to control your mind. And so the only thing you can do is either step back. You can step back and disconnect from it, and that's one of that prevents it. You can be conscious of what's going on, and even then they'll be able to manipulate you. But the algorithms are the new gods.
This is, by the way, this is what I was going to say about the Epstein thing is it is algorithmic hypnosis. It's which is not about persuading you of something. It's about behavioral conditioning, I think is the right way to phrase it. You're not being convinced of ideas. You're not being, there's not that we're going to present you with evidence and facts and
As
you're
well
going
as
to learn
ice. Add
something.
ice to that too.
We can add a thousand things to it because the idea is you're not being taught something. You're being trained on what to fixate on because they don't optimize for truth. They don't optimize for importance. Certainly not TikTok. It's optimized for engagement duration. And we know this. This is not my opinion. This is a fact. Is that engagement is driven by, and this has been documented, you can go look up 1,000 studies on this, outrage, fear, repetition, titillation. It is not about education or knowledge or resolution. Literally, once the algorithm catches you, even for a moment, issuing a trigger of an emotional response, the algorithm floods your feed with that until it crowds out everything else. And you think you're not doing it because you skip past it. But the microsecond that you glance at it before you skip past it is logged, and they know everything about you more than you know about yourself. And I've deleted all my social media. Okay. The exception of Truth Social now, which I use because I really enjoy engaging with the people there. But I'm not looking at the feed. I'm not engaging on that front. I'm having conversation with people who want to engage with me. So I use it more as a social tool, truly social media, than I do for anything else. But if you are caught in any algorithmic loop, it doesn't matter whether you're on the right or the wrong side of it. You're being flooded and you're being convinced of something through behavioral conditioning.
Guy, finish us off.
No, I was going to say, I've also reduced my social media consumption to a half hour a day, and that's only to try to keep up with the news. At this point, it's the only thing that you can do to try to protect yourself, except watching us. You can watch us. But I think one of the things we need to recognize is that we keep talking about freedom. We keep talking about free speech. We keep talking about all of these issues that are rooted in some sort of an ideal. We haven't yet processed how these issues relate to the modern technological ecosystem we live in. And we don't talk about that ecosystem from first principles yet. We don't talk about how does algorithmic manipulation influence free speech. We don't talk about how does the ability of algorithms to control people's minds influence the way national security, right? We just talk about these things as companies and businesses, and a lot of this has to do with the fact that we have lobbies. If we don't start thinking long-term as a group of individuals with a collective ambition, we're at a very dangerous point in history. But we have proven, as you said, time and time again, that we do have the ability to win if we start doing it.
Okay, well said, both of you. I want to move on, though, quickly to this one little, because I want to discuss something that we go on and the Judah have wanted to discuss for a few days. And I don't want the show to go on for 2 hours. So Trump pulled out being Trump today, and he said, He's not against regime change in Iran. And I found this very interesting as, what did you call it yesterday? The ship, the way it's supposed to be corrected, the carrier that we have headed out there, the second
Gerald
carrier.
Ford?
The what?
The Gerald Ford.
Yeah,
The
but you
aircraft
said it.
carrier?
No. He said it like the way heavily the troops. Or it doesn't matter how he said it. He said it much better than me. I'm like, yeah, we got a bunch of soldiers on board, and
That's right.
ship with a bunch of soldiers, so today he's did the regime change statement, which is part 2 of the negotiation in the 30 days, and
He
so
didn't just say
29 days to President Trump.
He didn't just say it would be okay. He said that it would be the best thing.
Yeah,
That's hinting at
Mhm.
the direction he's thinking
The
of in the
best thing that could
negotiation.
happen.
that's it.
And
I
yeah,
didn't
no,
mean
look,
like you have to be.
so
I didn't mean
so
that. I didn't mean that short.
So first of all, it was in typical Trump fashion. The most powerful statements he makes are said very casually. It's a remarkable thing about him that makes him a really interesting person to track, because he can spend half an hour on something unimportant, and just in a throwaway line, he said something that no president has said in decades about the Iranian regime. And again, not it's a possibility. It would be best.
Yeah.
Right. That means that their number one option in this debate is no change. His number one option in number one choice in this negotiation is get out of my house. That's a very significant thing. And when you combine it with, and just to take a moment on why I bring up that it's the Gerald Ford, it's important to understand that the Gerald Ford is one of the most significant, if not the most significant piece of equipment in the US's entire armed forces. It is one of the most modern aircraft carriers. It has some of the most modern aircraft on it. And if you wanted the symbol of American power that can be deployed around the world that would just say America, it's the Gerald R. Ford. He's not playing around. He's not sending sort of another Nimitz class, which would also be impressive. He's sending the best America has and saying, okay, you're stepping up the game. I'm stepping up the game.
And I think that him saying this specifically while he's doing all the deterrence or preemptively moving things into the region, as you're talking about, is actually a really good teaching moment for those people who don't know their history or don't understand how deterrence works or don't know the dynamics of power politics or even how authoritarian regimes think. I think saying something like this is going to get him attacked from both sides, right? People are going to go, oh, this is reminding me of Iraq, or this is this, or he wants America to be the police of the world, or this isn't America first. People are going to attack him from all sides. Democrats, Republicans, MAGA, not MAGA. This is one of those things. But it's important to understand that what he's saying is clarity. The Iranian regime is the core problem. It's not about bad optics. It's not a misunderstanding. The regime change means the regime that is the problem would be taken away and a new regime be put in place. It's good to simply acknowledge that reality. Didn't mean he's inventing a new policy, right? It means that he is stating out loud that clarity, and that clarity strengthens deterrence. Authoritarian regimes respond to fear and clarity much more than polite or political ambiguity. I love that Trump said this.
And there's a couple of other minor things that I think it's really important to understand. That one of the things that you've seen around the world is that we've seen multiple countries stopping Iran's shadow fleet. So Trump and Bassett suffocating the Iranian economy even further, right? At the same time, this extreme diplomacy, right? And I'm going to call sending the Gerald Ford into the theater an extreme diplomacy has worked in the past. I mean, nobody even remembers, but Assad just bailed after 2 days. There wasn't really a war to get rid of the Assad regime after 50 years of the Assad regime. He just picked up and left. And do we trust al-Jilani? No, we don't. He's a terrorist in a suit. But he's a terrorist in a suit with no army because Israel destroyed his army the minute Assad left.
Right. By the way, it's important. What you're saying is important. Is that you're not saying that what happens next is going to be great. What you're saying is step one has to happen.
But also, Assad fled. Israel destroyed the Syrian army's equipment. Al-Jilani stepped in, put on a suit, terrorist in a suit. But the only way he could get any sort of respect in the world is because Trump came to him and said, listen, I know who you are, but I'm going to play nice to you if you play nice with me. And you're going to do what I say and not what you and your crazy people want to do. You're going to do things my way. And otherwise, we'll get rid of you and put someone else will be there, right? So the fact is, it is actually possible for regimes to change due to pressure and not due to the engagement. And I think one of the things that, Judah, you keep bringing this up, Trump is not a warmonger. He doesn't want war. He understands that war is an essential part of diplomacy. And what he's willing to do is say, I am not leaving the table until this is done, but I'm going to give you every chance to walk away before I have to do it the hard way.
And you notice the good guide trick he did there to go on a few extra seconds. He said, he pointed, Judah, as Judah points out.
Right.
And so I wouldn't cut him off because I was waiting for him to compliment me on what I say. So that's a great. It's a great way of doing that, Guy. And by the way, the word I was looking for, David, thank you in the rants, is carrier strike group. I believe that's what you said yesterday, that it was a carrier strike group. The last thing that I want to bring up is more on the culture side. And, Golan and I were talking this week. Sadly, that actor, James Van Der Beek, died from Dawson's Creek. Now, he's not of our generation by any means. I mean, we were 20. Guy, maybe you a little bit more.
I grew up on Dawson's Creek.
No, but
are you kidding me?
if you grew up on Dawson's Creek, Golan, you were outdated as far as growing up.
Real quick story is that I did not watch Dawson's Creek. So I knew Kevin Williamson. I knew a lot of the people who were involved with the show, but I didn't watch the show because it sounded like a girl thing, some soapy drama, and so I didn't watch it. And then I went to New York to visit my friend I was working on some Broadway stuff, and I wanted to go to New Year's Eve at Times Square, which is a disaster, and you should never do it. And I ended up catching pneumonia, and so I was in bed for weeks at my friend's house in her basement. And her little brother had every episode of Dawson's Creek on VH. I was like, I got nothing better to do. This is before Netflix, before anything existed. I sat down, I watched the entire thing, and she will remind me occasionally that at some point in a pneumonic fever, sweating and probably incoherent, I came upstairs and weeping and said, Pacey is my spirit animal. She still reminds me of this. So I grew up on it. I just grew up on it after the fact.
Yeah, but you get my point. It's like we grew up on Beverly Hills 90210. Okay, we didn't grow up on Dawson's Creek, but that's not the point. Sadly, he died of cancer, and we've been talking a lot about it on our feeds. You see a lot of these they make whoever's doing it is doing this brilliant job of like older shows and showing the cast members, like from the 70s or 80s who's alive, and then they'll put the wings on those who've died. And I can't help but think to myself, there's something missing from this past generation. I want to say it's from like 2004 on. Yeah, I use the Killers as a reference of when they became big. But we have like 21 years of a generation that has no heroes and that has nobody to look up to. And I want you to think about this. He died and he raised $2 million for the GoFundMe has raised close to $2 million when it was originally set at $500,000, because it was the last days of the last types of shows that had those impacts. Really, those obviously somebody's going to say, well, this show had this show had this. There's a specific type of show, specific type of character, whether it be the Friends that we grew up, watching Friends, or all those different shows. I don't see it, and I watch TV. It's not like I'm not looking to see something go on, Guy. It's not like I'm like rooting against getting like a Love Landman. You know what I mean? This isn't like I'm against new TV. But there's something that really, there was a culture shift where, with the 80s of looking up to our heroes, our heroic action figures. And I feel terrible for this next generation that they don't have it.
They have ISO speed.
Yeah. Go ahead, Guy. I would like to hear your take on this.
So first of all, just before we move on, I just want to say James Van Der Beek, first of all, apart from being an iconic character growing up, he has been such an inspirational person to watch as a father and as a human being, as a grown-up, embracing values that really meant something. I saw a video of him that people have been circulating since he passed, talking about how he used to identify himself as an actor, and then he became a husband, and that was something that actually meant something. And then he became a father, and that really meant something. Just that someone that it wasn't just you could look up to him because he was famous. You could look up to him because he was a person who it would be a healthy aspiration to want to be like. So I think that's really worth it. I think one of the things about young, and to get to your point where kids have no heroes, I actually think the problem's worse than that, because kids do have heroes, and those heroes are all terrible human beings.
Mhm.
Right.
Those heroes are manufactured for the most part. They're not
What I
selected
mean,
to.
by the way, Guy, is what I'm like. I'm happy you brought that up. What I'm sort of referring to is in 20 years, nobody's going to remember the broad's name that did, that bombed that movie because of her. What was it? What was the Disney movie that bombed?
Snow White.
Rachel
Right.
Zegler.
Whatever her name is, nobody's going to remember. She's going to be lint in our memories. To use a little Equalizer line from the first Equalizer, like she'll be nothing but lint. And, you're talking about people that have left. I mean, I remember when Luke Perry died. It really, that was like, especially not that much older, but, so Guy, you're right. Their heroes are trash. And we didn't know enough about our heroes to know whether they were good or they weren't. Probably some of them were probably not good, but they were in such iconic things. And that's what's lacking is this iconic stuff. And
You
go
know what?
on, maybe I'm wrong.
I want to add something to this. No, no. Okay, I think that there's certain people who will transcend this, and we can talk about that. But it's interesting. You mentioned two people. So James Van Der Beek and Luke Perry. You mentioned those two. Now James is someone that I got to know personally. I was introduced to him this many years ago through Roger Avery, who was a co-writer of Pulp Fiction. But he
You just tell us you got introduced to him. It doesn't matter how.
no, this is an important thing because this is actually my point. Is when I was introduced to him, I knew him from his shows. I knew him from Varsity Blues. I knew him this and that. But when Roger introduced me, he didn't tell me a single credit. What he said, and he was working on a movie called Rules of Engagement or Rules of Attraction with him. But he didn't introduce me he didn't introduce him as an actor. He said, "Hey, this is a great guy." He told me about his heart. And when Luke Perry, anyone who knew Luke, I'm friends with some of the people from 90210. Every time they talk about Luke, they don't talk about his performances, although occasionally they will say, oh, he was great at that too. They talk about what a great person he was. Right now, if you look at all those trash fires of humanity that are people's quote unquote heroes, these amoral, unheroic people, they don't talk about whether they're good people. They talk about how vocal they were about the latest campaign. They talk about what pin they wore. That's what makes them a great person. If you go on their social media and you read comments, people are like, oh, I respect you so much because you're so outspoken on some political topic. They don't talk about them being, as Guy pointed out, a great husband, a great father. James Van Der Beek was someone who stood tall in public and private life. He was famous for his movies, but more importantly, he was a decent, kind, grounded human being that cared about stuff. He was a big vocal supporter of Israel. He cared about a lot of different things that inspired people, not just because he put a hashtag up on stuff. That's the world we live in today, is that all the heroes are now defined by how active they are politically, not by
Right,
actually being good people.
right, by their activism or whatever it is. And
Exactly.
again, it's like nobody's going to know who these people are in 20 years,
Yeah.
Guy. And it's like that we hit a time in our culture, whether whether it's 2004, 2009, or whenever it was. Well, let's just say 2009, Tropic Thunder came out, and the last of something great as far as I'm concerned. But Guy, I feel terrible for these people. And that's why I think so many people make these videos. It's because it brings them back to this sort of innocent place, right? They make videos. You see them, the one guy that makes that incredible video where he's like taking selfies on sets with the actors.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's like with the Goonies and he's with all these
You're talking
different,
about the AI stuff, right?
the AI stuff
Yeah.
where he's like, obviously it's AI, right? But he's like going back to St. Elmo's Fire or the Breakfast Club or whatever it is. It was a special time. And I feel terrible for people. You're lucky. You guys are lucky. You get to show your kids this stuff.
Yeah.
You get to show your kids the Karate Kid for the first time, or Die Hard for the first time, or Indiana Jones for the first time. I dare anybody to tell me. I was thinking about this last night. It started to go on about this, but I was thinking about this last night. When we grew up in the 80s, We had like the Fall Guy, we had Magnum, we had 21 Jump Street, we had the A-Team, we had Hunter, we had Wise Guy, Crime Story. I mean, think about every show that we had, Riptide. It could have been every bad Stephen J. Cannell show. I would take over any of these shows today. We were so
But I will say,
blessed.
I'll tell you something though. The audience today is still hungry for this stuff, despite the fact that we don't give it to them. And how do you know? Because Mark Harmon, who is in his 70s, I think, they put him on NCIS. It becomes the #1 show in the world. They still want this sort of
Yes.
thing, despite the fact that we keep saying, instead of giving you people who are going to represent values and courage and sacrifice and, larger than life, we're going to give you sensitive, vulnerable guys who kind of look like a girl, but with the mustache. And it's like we keep doing this thing because we're trying to push a narrative, and that's how we're destroying society. But people want real men. That's why when Josh Brolin shows up and he looks like a man, you're like, I want to follow him for a while. And I love Timothy Chalamet, but Timothy Chalamet is not a hero. He's someone that can
Again,
open.
another person,
But
I got to tell you, in 15 or 20 years, people are going to be like, who?
Look,
Yeah,
I don't agree with you on that, but I will say this. He is a star, but he is not a hero in the old sense. He will carry a project. He has good taste. He can do bankable IP and all that. He's emotional and sensitive, but he's not a guy you're like, I'm going to follow him into battle.
But I think it's also worth noting that in the past, like when we were kids, there were heroes and there were celebrities. And celebrities were people who you liked seeing them act or hearing them sing or whatever. And heroes were the characters that they created that you admired. And part of the reason for that was because you didn't have a constant window into every thought they had while they were on the toilet. And so one of the things that's killed the hero and the celebrity is that these actors, and we have to remember, these people are actors. These people portray roles that we aspire to. They don't have to be the people that we aspire to necessarily. Some of them can transcend that, like James Van Der Beek, who became a person to aspire to, not because of the role. But those two things were separate, and they spent enough time being off camera that you would see, you only got to know who your actors really were when they'd go on Letterman and let loose and tell some jokes.
And by the way, you wouldn't then either. I'm telling you this from the inside.
Right.
Those conversations they vet, that story can't be told. This is the response. I'm going to ask you a question. You have something that is pre-written that you are going to tell me about. Today, you hear about their politics. You hear about their therapy language. You hear about their outrage of the week, their moral lectures. It breaks the spell because there's no mystery. There's no restraint. They won't shut up.
But the reason it's relevant is because we're talking about whether or not Timothy Chalamet will have lasting power. I have no idea whether or not, I can't even remember losing the name of who played Paul Atreides in the last.
I got to be honest, I couldn't pick him out of a lineup. And this is where Golan, I'll say this is where you might be too in the weeds on this because you're in the industry and you watch movies more than, let me tell you, for people that are not in the industry, they wouldn't recognize Timothy Chalamet, however you pronounce his name, from Timothy Smith. Okay, that's
who wouldn't?
Most of the American public would not recognize.
You and I are going to differ on this one because I don't track my own opinion. I track what happens in terms of audience opinion. I happen to know that he is someone who, and by the way, good for him. This is a guy who went on every podcast from the right to the left. He didn't talk about what he felt politically. Notice that. Mm-hmm. He has been very smart. Who did he learn from? Right. He learned from Tom Cruise. He said, what does Tom Cruise believe? Until he went Scientology, until he jumped on the couch, all you knew was he was a movie star. That's it. I want to go watch that guy. He's awesome. Timothy has now been very careful to make sure that he'll go talk about sports because everyone who wants to talk about sports is listening. He'll talk about music because everyone who wants to talk about music is listening. He doesn't give his opinion on anything. He doesn't get political. He doesn't wear pins. He doesn't protest.
I'll tell you what, when we're doing this show,
he's actually doing it the right way.
Well, in 20 years, I'll tell you what, we'll have the same conversation on the daily cheat sheet.
But it's worth noting. But by the way, Tom Holland, Zendaya, Sydney Sweeney, all of them have been, there's this new generation of celebrities who are actually realizing that the old generation of celebrities knew what they were doing. But there was that generation that you're pointing to that has no heroes. Their celebrities tried to become influencers and became the worst of both worlds.
Yes, it's a good point. People are learning from the mistakes of the people that have made atrocious mistakes. And listen, we got to wrap it up. But all I know is Airwolf is now on Amazon Prime, and
And guy you're talking about, Kyle MacLachlan, is the guy who played Paul Atreides in the original.
See?
I just had to tell you.
The character of Paul Atreides remained iconic from the films as well because of that movie, right? Like, it's just a difference. No one will remember, the people that watch the new Dune will remember Timothée Chalamet, not Paul Atreides.
Correct.
I'm so lost on this conversation because I have no idea what either of you are talking about. Okay, I just listen. People want heroes, and people, and somebody brought up your father should be your first hero, and that was like that was the whole point of I have a hard time watching it now because it's one of my favorite movies, but A Bronx Tale, and that was the whole point of A Bronx Tale with De Niro, and was the working man's the hero. And that was such a fantastic movie, and but the working man's the hero. So yeah, the soldiers should be the heroes. But we have to be realistic, and people do watch television and they do watch movies and they do tend to look up to people. So this is why it's but you look at somebody like Trump, and I look at what he's done as heroic. This is pre him getting shot, and it's a dying breed, to use a Killer's song. A Killer's line, and David is making fun of me that I keep on bringing up the Killers. Go on.
Sure, so. You're going to need another favorite band soon.
Yeah, why?
I think everyone's just going to have to get used to it. Okay, this is what's happening.
Listen, growing up, I obviously the Killers weren't around. I could bring up I bring up the Traveling Wilburys. I could bring up any of those. Listen,
you should tell it sometime. Your Traveling Wilburys story is a good story. You should tell it sometime.
Well, it's not my story; it's their story.
It's their story, but you told it well. I liked it.
We did, and Mend took us to task for it. I think that we're just going to keep. You know what? Just smile like you mean it, man. This is. We're in a world where we're going to give the references we want to give, and if you don't like it, run away.
But to help Judah get back to where he was going, and to build on what you were saying, Judah, I actually am a little bit more optimistic than you. I think people are starting to discover what heroes are again. I think that we're seeing the culture move back in a direction where that matters. I think we're seeing kids move back in that direction. And I think we're seeing that the entertainment industry, which has refused to provide that sustenance for so long, is struggling for exactly that reason. And we are seeing more and more people do heroic things. In Israel today, the hero is the everyman soldier that saved the country, right? It is built into the culture. It is built into humanity that we need that aspiration. And I think we're seeing more and more kids looking for that. And we're seeing people start to find ways to deliver it.
And we have to make sure that we do not allow bad actors to hijack those ideas. This is actually really important. You look at something like Paw Patrol, where kids are watching this, they want to see people who are, frankly, police and soldiers and people who are putting themselves on the line, and dogs, yes. But don't forget, Chase is a police officer. Like, there's a fireman.
I have no idea what the hell you're talking about.
Doesn't matter. The point is that kids gravitate towards that because they do want heroes. And I have now seen campaign after campaign trying to compare Paw Patrol to ICE and saying that Nickelodeon should cancel the show and all of this stuff. And it's like, we can't let people do these brainwashing techniques. We have a generation that might be saved if we can allow them to truly gravitate towards the heroes that deserve to be heroes. I say, let's keep building these people up. As Guy pointed out, soldiers, officers, people who sacrifice to make sure that we can continue to live our way.
And listen, Ben Stein wrote a brilliant book called The Real Stars, which was in honor to to our soldiers. And so it's time to end. I'm done. Dude, Yeah, I've had it with both. I've had it
We
with
just
both of
ran out
you.
of battery.
I've had it with both of you for the week. Gonna go back to watching Fringe season 4 for the 50th. But David, yes, The Boondock Saints was one of my favorite movies that was made accidentally. It was accidentally made. Yeah, we could get into that story of
Oh
how
man, I got great stories. I know
yeah,
everybody involved.
we don't have time for that, but I did love that movie, David, and got to meet him. I got to interview Sean Patrick Flannery for when I was doing an addiction show. He was not an addict, but he just came on. He's just a good dude. It was a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun when you get to talk about a certain role that you love, and it's like I don't know if you saw the Dexter, the latest version of Dexter. Did you see that last year? They
No.
literally stole, like, the woman in it is using, like, the William Dafoe, like the weird, like the weird cop, listening with the headsets, sort of. It was like a direct thievery of
Oh,
the
interesting.
of Defoe and the Boondock Saints. Yeah, shame on them. And hopefully they'll make a Boondock Saints 4 or 3. And on that note, I thank you both for indulging. God, I mean, it's really sad. This guy had 6 kids, James Van Der Beek, and it's so
Yeah.
nice to watch $2 million get raised for his family with 6 kids because,
Just
I mean, it's really nice. And God,
because he spent everything they spent everything the family owned trying to fight the cancer. Right?
yeah, that's
His
exactly
family's well.
right. And
It's
and
worth
it's
noting. You
sad.
got it. Rich people asking for more money. This is a real
Thank
American
you for
story.
pointing this out. It's
Yeah,
actually
no,
really important
and
for
it's
people to hear
also
that.
extremely to point out is like it's interesting, and this goal on actors used to have the best health insurance, like literally the best health insurance, and I think it was Melissa Gilbert when she was the head of SAG that might have
Mhm.
messed up the insurance policies for actors. I could be
It's
wrong.
it's so bad now. Look, I will just tell you that there's a friend of ours who is a very big actress, anchored her own show, legendary, made a lot of money. And because of the way they've organized actors' health insurance now, she is desperately willing to take on any role at the moment because she needs to get a certain number of days and a certain amount of
Yeah.
dollars made in order to keep her health insurance despite being a legend. It is a broken system.
And it's funny, people are going to say, I don't care about actors. They're saying, some of them are human and good people too. Some, not a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. As you said, there's at least 4 nice people in Hollywood.
But again,
There's,
it's a story. It's a story that reflects on normal. Ironically, this is something that you can use to reflect on the hardships that normal people experience. Maybe they didn't have such a glorious career, an illustrious career, but the challenge that you're now seeing James Van Der Beek's family going through, it's part of the reason that we need to be better. We need to give a better country to our kids in the future.
Yeah, that's extremely well said. And again, thanks for indulging me. And I was indulging Golan because he wanted to talk about it, but I wanted to talk about it too. I thought it was important. And
Thank you for that.
listen, this is life. We have to talk about life sometimes. I don't want every conversation in my life being about politics. I talked to, David on the phone. We're talking about the TV show Supernatural. I mean, like, we're just,
I love that
like,
shit.
yeah, I
Yeah,
love
me
that
too.
show too. It's just such a great guilty pleasure. It's like a fantastic guilty pleasure. And, it's important to talk about these things. And it's like, I mean, when people used to go to work every day, right? You had water cooler talk, and I think like that when we lost the water cooler talk, and it just went online, you weren't going to scream at the person next to you at the water cooler, "Hey, the Kardashians suck." You know what I mean? But at the water cooler, you'd be like, "Well, I didn't watch it last night." Yeah, online, you're like, vermin, for like, so we got to get some water coolers back, just put them in
Yeah.
the middle of like dog parks. On that note, I want to thank you both. You're way more awake than I am, and yeah, it's been a good week. So it's a good week. It's a good week. Trump and DHS saved a lot of kids, cut inflation down. What is it, to 2.4%? I think I don't know if that's the total it's down to right now, but gas prices are going down, egg prices are going down, the border's secure, saved all these kids, saving the world one day at a time. I mean, so let's be blessed where we are. I mean, it might look doom and gloom sometimes, but God, we are blessed. And we are really blessed. And I learned that a lot from talking about that way from Ben Stein. Like, we're really blessed to be in America, as bad as it is sometimes, and as annoying as these assholes are that try to ruin it for the rest of us. We're blessed. And so thank you for everybody that supports the show. Thank you both for waking up at a normal time and doing the show, even though you didn't sleep the whole night. And we could have done this 6 hours ago. It would have been much. Had I known you guys weren't going to sleep, I would have been like, okay, let's do it at 5. You can find us everywhere at thedailycheatsheet.com. I want to wish everybody, I want to thank all the people that came to the Rumble Rants knowing we'd be on late. So Turbo Dave, Mello, and if I'm missing anybody, I'm sorry. Thank you. It means the world to us. You can find us everywhere. I want to wish everybody a good morning, afternoon, and night world, wherever you are. God bless you all.